I believe I stopped there.
Yeah.
I don't know how to. Let's just leave this like that.
What time does it start? 2:45?
2:30, I think it was, right?
It is?
Yeah.
That's awesome. You're recording it.
Oh, okay. Well, hey, Jackson.
Not that bad. Thursday, my dog. I stopped at 11.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I said 12:45.
Yeah, maybe I'll sit out there
That's my
and
time.
tomorrow morning.
Wait a minute. It's all right.
Yeah.
Hey, Jackson.
It's crazy.
All right, so I'm gonna be right up.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
I almost did. I almost posted it. I got a Facebook Live right now.
Something on Facebook?
Yeah. Just videos like, two people like, or perfect outfit. It's supposed to be, you'll probably roll in like 5 minutes late. Because you roll recording. No, have a, we're supposed to have a lab meeting next Tuesday. And then instead of doing that, they're going to come here. Basically, my thesis defense, pre-thesis defense.
You already have it. I love it. It's open.
Yeah, this actually be probably more difficult than my thesis defense because it's more information and a lot more people than I expect. Yeah. No, I think by like this international studies program, people do. Yeah. That's pretty cool how that works out. Anything? Did you want to ask about a relationship? It'll make it weird. Yeah. No, you're saying
But you, she had a business here, right?
Candy getting tested?
But it sounds like she never mentioned you guys anyway.
Is this something I was posting on Facebook?
Yeah, never like short jacks, had like 2 delays or flight cancellations. Yeah. It's just that shocking, that has been a storm system that's going over.
No, what Liz is going to do is just, she can waive the entire requirements. She can mark it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Get registered.
Yeah, those are the data are leaving.
I should know someone's on the cloud in the skyline.
She can go in and just.
Oh, here? Yeah.
It's beautiful. Of course, she's not like it.
I don't like that. Yeah, it's just comfortable.
Okay. So what is this guy?
Yeah, so it's stuff like
I pretty much did leave this class. I had to study for it like, the night of like torrential downpour. It's so stressful.
They're relaxing.
It's what people tell me. Like, your pattern on the roof. Your pattern on the roof. Wind blowing against the light.
yeah, no, yeah, it's a 0 credit. It's really a 0 credit.
I'm still terrified. I've never seen one.
But I do need that.
It's actually someone
Right there where you
I saw a water spout once on the St. John River. It wasn't going toward me anyway.
it's just so like horrifying. Like I was like 3 times throughout the night, like an hour. Like
It wasn't a hurricane.
I wasn't in that during hurricanes. I stayed in St. John's.
Should have been right in Miami during Hurricane Andrew. That was
Were you?
I was. I was 2 at the time. I
I wasn't sure I was born yet. What year was it? 1990?
Were you even alive then?
91. You're not part of it.
I just don't remember them.
You're an 80s kid.
Oh wait, it was 1992 that happened.
So you were born in 90? Slow jokes for 80s kids.
The whole neighborhood was torn out from my birthday. Hurricane. I actually have a few stars. I actually got a few stars from the hurricane. Physical ones.
Really?
Yep.
Let me see.
One's here and the rest are. Of course, they're also very faded at this point.
Someone made that around, man. Give me a break.
I actually heard him. Maybe something here about a piece of trash. Nobody else is around. Stupid, I'm like.
That makes me fun.
So maybe it's not really a joke on his part.
We started off the conversation with the first guy who
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for being here. I'm Professor Clayton McCarl. I'm excuse me, the director of the International Studies program. This is an exciting event for me because it happened by accident. Ambassador Nancy Soderberg introduced me to Evan about a month ago, and he was talking to me a bit about his research, and it just kind of happened that we had this hour and 15 minutes sort of loose in our schedule. But also this semester I've been trying to build relationships with the graduate programs that are here on campus to give international studies students a chance to get to know graduate students, to learn a little bit more about their experience, and to see what it's like to do your own research, to have a topic of your own that you kind of that is yours, and on which you're becoming the expert. And so I thought this would be a great opportunity to have Evan come and talk about something that's really relevant to our course this semester, but also would give us that opportunity to start what I hope will be an ongoing series of talks by graduate students about their research. So with that, I'm going to hand things over to Evan Capello. As for those of you who don't know him, he is this is his final semester in the Master of Science in Psychology program.
Psychological science.
Psychological science
A little bit
program.
redundant.
So please join me in welcoming it.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for having me. It's nothing more that graduate students enjoy than talking about the research. They get to do it a lot, and we spend a lot of time cradling it like our babies. So it's a lot of fun actually talking about it. So we're going to be talking about hard copy versus hashtag, and essentially it's these channels of ISIS propaganda. So ISIS has two main ways they get information disseminated to potential recruits, and social media is a big one, and online printed journals are also a major one. So I'm going to start with this. It's a quote I actually just found this morning in a paper written by Dr. John Horgan from Georgia State. Essentially what this quote is saying is that we can't take a oversimplification type of approach to this type of research. What I'm telling you today may not apply to a different format of social media, may not apply to a different terrorist organization. This is pretty specific, and an attempt to oversimplify it wouldn't do justice to the complexity of ISIS. So basically, oversimplification is a big one. There's also an issue in the field of lack of collaboration. Something that Dr. McCarl just talked about, coordinating with the graduate programs here. It's exactly what we need. International studies is major here. It's probably bigger than even psychology. Psychology is kind of just easing its way into this kind of study. So collaboration is really important. It's something that psychologists have to be willing to do to get the full picture. And another thing is the lack of terrorism behavior researchers. We still don't know what makes a terrorist a terrorist. We don't know what behaviors lead someone into getting recruited. So there's still research needed there. So we're going to try to work our way into that. So this is just a bunch of lines on a PowerPoint presentation. It may not mean anything to a lot of you, but this is the center of our conflict that we're going to be talking about today. This is the Middle East. What's missing is Kazakhstan right above Uzbekistan. I added in Pakistan, for some reason that wasn't there. But essentially this is the center of the activity we're seeing for terrorism. This is where it's all occurring. And I'll show a few maps in a moment, but this is kind of what we're interested in, this area right here. But historically speaking, terrorism's always been an issue. ISIS isn't the first, they're not going to be the last. They are the first, however, to use social media in the way that they have in their recruitment strategies. So this is where ISIS was as of 2014. So the area I pointed out before, you have Syria and Iraq, pretty large expanse. They took a window that was open right after Al-Qaeda and capitalized on it. 2015, you see it looked like someone dropped the ball and the water dispersed. Like, it's pretty much exactly what happened. ISIS began to start decentralizing, moving a little further away from a compacted group. And then in 2016, this is as of December, you see even smaller control. So if you notice here, Baghdad kind of controlled. 2015, we see Baghdad's pretty much surrounded. Then you see here that the front from ISIS has moved significantly out of Iraq. There's still parts of Iraq that are under control, little pockets. But the work that our partners are doing is actually working. It's pushing ISIS away. And we'll talk about why that's a problem. So these are three main flags that I think are important just to be aware of their existence, to know what they are. I don't know if anyone in here is interested in flags. There's a lot of cool stories behind them. But for instance, ISIS's flag there in the top, it's called the Black Standard. It's a flag that has a lot of meaning to Islam. It's one of the flags that Muhammad was said to have used during his original creation of Islam. And then you have the Syrian flag here on the left with 3 stars, and then the Turkish flag. And here are the leaders that stand in front of those flags. You have Baghdadi from ISIS, Assad from Syria, and Erdogan from Turkey. So these are some big characters, and since this is an international studies-oriented presentation, I thought it'd be worth mentioning these people so you know some names of who they belong to. Assad's kind of in some hot water now. I think I would be not giving you a full picture if I didn't mention this, but you know, there was the gas attacks yesterday against people in Syria. Horrific attack. Assad is one of the people who they're considering as the potential cause of that attack, as the actor there. So he's potentially going to get charged with war crimes. Erdogan has his own set of problems. So these 3 men, although they're leaders in their own right, I don't know if Baghdadi's a leader necessarily, but they have their own motives, and that's why you see these issues in the Middle East. That's why you see ISIS gaining such traction. It's because within these countries, you're seeing problems themselves. So Turkey's not really in a good stance with the Kurds. Syria's not really in good stance with anybody right now except Russia, and yeah, Baghdadi's not in good stance with anybody, thankfully. Here are the 2 players. You have Rouhani from Iran and Putin from Russia. Again, their own motives for the Middle East. So again, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention who they were. Russia, obviously, as of today, is not too happy with some of the decisions that our president has made in reaction to the Syrian gas attacks. So just something to keep in mind, that we may have more enemies at the gate than we really anticipate. So back to focus it. Back to ISIS, get away from unfortunate current events. This is the coalition that the United States is a part of. This is Operation Inherent Resolve, and essentially what we're doing is not only offering air-to-ground missiles and things like that, but we're also offering training to Iraqi forces, and this is really, really key to gaining control back of the Middle East and moving ISIS out of the Middle East. And you'll see why a little bit later, why it's really important that we take advantage of the Iraqi forces. So this is the way ISIS sees themselves. These are actually screenshots I took from their propaganda. So you're probably going to be one of how many people have seen this that aren't being recruited. You see up here, this is ISIS. It's how they actually see themselves as opponents to the rest of the world. Although we have all of these countries and this huge coalition against ISIS, they see themselves as worthy adversaries. So it's dangerous that you have this mentality. It's part of what makes somebody a radical, is the fact that they don't mind standing behind that flag and charging at all these other countries, because they're not wrong, everyone else is wrong, right? So some of the key things that they're saying here, you know, the spark has been lit here in Iraq, and its heat will continue to intensify by Allah's permission until it burns the Crusader enemies and armies in Dabiq. So may Allah purify Dabiq from the treachery, the Salwa, and raise the flag of the Khalifa over its land. These are really important to remember, and I mentioned those two things because, as you'll notice later in the presentation, ISIS doesn't have as much control as they did when they released this infograph. Here's some definitions that I think it's really important to know to really understand this presentation. And also the issue with doing this research is I don't know Arabic. Not many people do this research. It's really important to have a basic understanding of a few words just to kind of get through and get the whole picture. So you have a caliphate. You've probably heard this term before. Essentially what a caliphate is Islamic form of government, but it goes a little further than that. If you really follow the tenets of Islam, you can only really have one caliphate. They are the leaders of the Islamic Church as a whole. They're led by a caliph, and Baghdadi is the caliph of ISIS, and essentially that's kind of their leader. Think about it, the Pope of the Catholic Church. Then you have kuffar, essentially a non-believer, someone that doesn't believe in Islam, someone who is a Muslim. It's used as a derogatory term. You'll see that a lot in propaganda. They'll call you filthy cuff. It's basically a derogatory term as a non-believer. You're an enemy of ISIS. Then you have this term mujahideen. You may have heard this a lot. Someone who's engaging in jihad is engaging in mujahideen. And then jihad itself is basically a soldier against enemies of Islam. So we get this idea that jihad is some radical idea. It's really not extremely radical. It's just a soldier form in Islam. If you're an enemy to Islam, an actor going against you is just performing jihad. It's not. I think it gets diluted in the way people use it. And then hijra is the immigration to Mecca that Muslims take. It's been used by ISIS to talk about immigration to Syria to fight in the front. They say pli hijra means essentially leave where you're at, come to the Syrian front and fight for us, kind of taking that meaning out of its original context. And then you'll see these three terms here, and you probably use them interchangeably talking about ISIS. Then you have ISIL, which is the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant. And the Levant is just these four countries here. They also call this the Sham, Syria, Lebanon, Israel, and Jordan. Then you have ISIS, and I put a little asterisk next to that to remind myself. As of February 2017, this is the official name for ISIS. The implication of calling it ISIL is noting that they have control in Lebanon and Israel and Jordan. They really don't. Their control is limited to Iraq and Syria right now. And that's why ISIS is being used as the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria. And then this term right here that they don't like at all, because it means to step on something with your foot, so it's a derogatory term. But it's technically the acronym appropriate for ISIS would be Daesh. So just to give my elementary understanding of this, Al-Dawla is a kind of honorary term, it's an honorary title. Then you have Islamia, Iraq, and Sham. So it's probably closer to ISIL in terms of the interpretation. The Islamic State of Iraq and the Sham, which would be the Levant, Lebanon, Israel, Jordan, and Syria. So they're just some terms that are being thrown around, or IS, Islamic State, but the official term now is ISIS. So I can stop using the other ones, confusing myself. So now to discuss Islam a little bit. This is a really rudimentary understanding of Islam, just for the purposes of this presentation. But essentially speaking, there are kind of two sects within Islam, Shia and Sunni. And it all started with the death of their prophet Muhammad in 632 AD. The biggest issue that they have in agreeing with each other is just the fact that they don't agree who's the caliph, who's going to lead their church. When Muhammad died, the caliph for Shia was supposed to be a descendant of Muhammad. It was supposed to be his son. However, Sunnis disagree with that. They actually wanted to put his father-in-law in the role of prophet or caliph. And that's where you have this separation. Sunnis believe that you can be voted in as a caliph, very democratic. Whereas the Shia believe that you have to be a descendant, almost like a king. So most Muslims are Sunni. Most countries that are Muslim are primarily Sunni. And ISIS is a Sunni Islamic organization. Then you have these few pockets of primarily Shia countries, Iran, Pakistan, India, and Iraq. But primarily speaking, Sunni is the biggest one. A lot of terror organizations are, not because there's anything wrong with Sunni necessarily, don't get that impression, just because there's more of them. There's a lot more Sunni than there are Shia Muslims. So now I'll talk about the real problem here. The problem that I'm trying to address in my thesis is this issue of foreign fighter recruitment. The biggest thing that ISIS has done that has revolutionized the work that they're doing, or terrorism in general, is non-Arabic propaganda. It's the biggest thing that ISIS has been able to achieve. Al-Qaeda had a program, a recruitment manual that they would use, and it would be something that they would use to interact with people over the internet. But ISIS really brought non-Arabic propaganda into the limelight and made it a priority as a part of their propaganda. So the three biggest reports they release, the Islamic State report was the first one, and it's released in 2 languages. Then you have the Dabiq, which is 4 languages, and the Ramaya, which is 7 plus languages. No one really knows how many. It grows. But this is the most recent of the journals, Ramaya. The Dabiq is a city in Syria that they lost control of, so they had to cancel that journal, and now Ramaya is one that they use. Ramaya stands for Rome, which is actually pretty funny. Reading through the Dabiq, they talk about crusaders, and they kind of trash on the Roman crusaders quite a bit. It's kind of ironic they named their last journal Rome, and it did so because they didn't want to label it down to one city in case they lose the city again. So if you see a lack of confidence in ISIS, this would be probably one of the biggest things that you can point out. They don't like Rome, but they're afraid of losing anything else that they label, so they're just not going to label it anymore. So since 2014, this is the Sufan group put together this report. Well, we had 27,000 to 31,000 recruits leave the fight with ISIS from over 100 countries. This number was gathered from the UN reports, different countries put together reports, empirical studies, and it was all combined to come up with around 27 to 31,000. You'll see numbers as low as 12,000. General consensus is closer to 30. So quite a bit. So foreign fighters by region, the largest areas we're seeing recruitments actually come from is obviously the Middle East, the biggest one, proximity. Also the Maghreb, which I'll go through the next slide. And then you have Western Europe and the former Soviet republics. North America, not a huge number, 280. However, ideology is so much different, and we're so far away from the Middle East in terms of proximity, where this other countries are a little bit closer. The 280 actually is a pretty large number considering where we're at. So, like I said, Maghreb is one of the big ones. And to describe where that is, this is Africa. This is actually the northwestern part of Africa. So from Libya right over here, this is kind of the old Ottoman Empire. These are primarily Muslim countries in northwestern Africa. So this is where they're getting a lot of their recruits from as well. I even put a little note over here. Jordan, Israel, right over here. So again, to proximity. This connection right here actually is Jordan. So they meet. So having 8,000 people generally come from this area is probably not as crazy as 280 coming from the United States, because you have to hop on a plane to do that. Not necessarily the case here, but very large number nonetheless. So back to this. This is growth from 2014 to 2015. You see some countries have doubled and tripled in that year. Now this is when ISIS was really gaining some steam. And I'll go through the timeline a little bit later. But this is when ISIS was really, really prominent. So you see this jump when they started releasing things like the Dabiq and the Islamic State report and started growing their presence on Twitter. You see this massive growth in recruitment. So it's an issue. You probably see the numbers slowly leveling off now when the new reports come out. They haven't come out yet. But as of this report, we're seeing growth. So this new message that ISIS is pushing is this fight from within kind of rhetoric. One of the things that I've seen multiple times in propaganda is this idea of no need to leave, stay home and fight. Why would you want to come to the Middle East? You don't have to. War is at home. So it makes sense when you think about it. If you're going to be attacking the true kuffar, it would make sense to stay in your home country and fight from within. So ISIS kind of took this message and ran with it. That's why you see a lot of lone wolf attacks. It's are these people that are being reached out to, like, well, they never made a trip to Syria. How could they be radicalized? You don't need to be on a plane to Syria to be considered radicalized. You can do that online now over the internet. So this fight from within message is also probably contributing to the leveling off or even decline that we're seeing with ISIS recruitment. So this is social media. I'm primarily focused on Twitter. Thankfully, Twitter has caught up the game. I'll go over that a little bit later. But back at the beginning of the study, this was 2014, I got this. Twitter was having a really hard time keeping up with ISIS recruits and ISIS recruiters. And this is an actual tweet that I pulled off. A fella saying other account locked back in no time. This is a terrorist recruiter who was able to get his account unlocked. He was spreading rhetoric, hate speech, things like that. He got his account suspended, and he came right back. You're seeing that with all of these accounts here. Something that became really common for a little while is these Twitter eggs. If any of you guys have Twitter accounts, that's the first profile picture you get. Twitter logo is a bird. You just hatched your egg. A lot of the ISIS supporters would use this as a way to kind of conceal their identity until it became so obvious that Twitter eggs meant ISIS radical. They stopped using those and started using other pictures. But essentially, there was no real formula that Twitter could put together a couple of years ago to end this kind of radicalization. So back to the reported reports that they put out. So Islamic State report released 4 issues before it was terminated. Not a whole lot. The Dabiq let 15 issues, which is my main issue to study here is the Dabiq. So they made 15 issues before they lost the city of Dabiq and had to say no more for that title. And Ramaya is the newest one. As of April 4th, a few days ago, they had released their 8th issue of the Ramaya. And it's pretty much the same kind of information. Future, I'm looking at doing a comparative analysis between the Dabiq and Ramaya. But again, Ramaya is something that will probably continue for a while, because like I said, Rome is just an ideology, it's not a place. Chances are they're not going to lose Rome, they don't even have it. So that'll probably stay around for a while, so I'm going to keep my eye on that one. That's pretty interesting. So the two main channels of propaganda dispersal that I went over earlier, social media. My interest is in Twitter. When I first started this study a couple years back, Twitter was booming. Took me maybe 5 minutes to find a radical. It's a little bit more difficult now. And then just printed journals, and I'm interested in the Dabiq. It's the only one that had a substantial number of issues that I could really look at. Islamic State report was just only 4. Not a whole lot of information to quantify there. And these are all distributed by the media center called Al Hayat. It's this mecca of media for ISIS. It's actually extremely impressive if you look at all the connections that Al Hayat has. There are tons and tons, more than I could put on a slideshow, of connections that they have with different countries and cities that are reporting directly to Al Hayat. Al Hayat's taken it and they're dispersing it through the Dabiq and the Ramaya now. So it's actually funny too, if you're familiar with Al Jazeera's logo. Looks like a bunch of squiggly lines, almost like a bass clef. Al Hayat uses a very similar logo. Essentially, it's just a way of writing Allah, kind of a fancy way of doing it in modern standard Arabic. But again, it's this ploy to try to reach out to the masses. If you can kind of mimic something like Al Jazeera, which is a pretty reputable brand, you're going to gain a little more traction with people who aren't familiar with Islam like I wasn't. So Al Hayat is a revolutionary thing for terrorists and for ISIS to use it. It's giving you a little taste of what's to come in the future groups. So with Twitter, kind of hypothesized that the early stages of radicalization will show less radical messages. If someone reaches out to you as a layperson and says, do you want to cut the heads off of Kafar? You're not going to know what that means. That's extremely entangled message with ideology that you're not aware of yet. So the early stages, less radical messages, they're going to be looking at targeting uncertainties. They want you to be in a place that you kind of don't know how you feel about international politics. And these ideological personal messages. So they're going to be, there's going to be ideology infused in there, probably from the Quran, because they have Quran to support what they want to do. But it's going to be targeted you as an individual. So where are you at? How educated are you? Unlike Al-Qaeda, ISIS is interested in people with college degrees. Al-Qaeda said no, they don't want people that are that have college degrees. You're too educated, you're not going to believe them. ISIS, on the other hand, has such a really fine-tuned method that they prefer people who are intelligent, who kind of a general idea of how to comprehend these things. So we looked first at just some categorical stuff. So statements links, persuasive messages. These are kind of things you see on Twitter. So statement is basically just someone wrote something. So I just got Justin Bieber tickets for this weekend. It'd be kind of like a statement. I don't like Justin Bieber. Links to image an article would be like a link to the event I'm going to, so the Justin Bieber concert. And then the persuasive message, motivation, support seeking would be, if you're not a believer, you should die. Come follow me to the concert. So something like that. Is it like too late for Justin Bieber references? Probably like a few years behind. I got to edit that one. All right. So the hashtags that we're kind of interested in. So when you look at hashtags, things you can search on Twitter, you can search a hashtag, look at the latest tweets, look at the most popular tweets to use that hashtag. So some of the big ones that I found from past research was this one here. People say his word. It's written down in Arabic. That's how it was presented online. You have this other one, urgent, which, it's a crapshoot. Don't use urgent if you're searching for that stuff because everyone uses urgent for everything. And then Islamic Caliphate's also a really big one that they use. I'll go into why those are problematic a little bit later. So back to the debate. There's 15 issues to date. Last one is in 2016. Really important. We'll get to it. So these are more targeted towards the latter stages of radicalization. So people, you're not going to go online and just Google the debate because most of you probably didn't know it existed before an hour ago or 30 minutes ago. So this is more for people that have been familiarized with ISIS, they kind of know what's going on. A recruiter's going to say, hey, check out this website. You can download all the journals here. So these are more targeted towards developing that in-group identity. There's a concept of intergroup bias where you like the people that are like you, you don't like the people that aren't like you. That's the kind of message that ISIS is really trying to push. So like us, build your identity within us. They're pushing this idea of stability, which was a problem when they lost Abik. But they want to say, oh, we're winning, we're gaining traction, we're a great organization to be a part of. No one wants to be a part of a crumbling organization. They talk about tactical victories. This is a really big one. Another reason why the Dabiq died, because there's not a whole lot of tactical victories left. And attack motivation. So these are coming in to push people to get out there, grab their arms, and get on the front lines in Syria. So past research coded different types of ads and articles that were in the Dabiq. They found that 58% were articles. These are something you can see like New York Times, just a front page thing talking about what's going on for the day. A statement, usually that's by someone important, a caliph, or someone who's reading hadith or someone who has importance in the organization, the head of the media center. And then ads, which are like I showed at the beginning with that soldier with his AK-47. You have a picture, bunch of little statements around it, easy to read. You get the message of it, just look at the picture, you don't have to read anything. Really convenient if you don't feel like reading your work. So variables of interest that I looked into. The first one is this idea of need for cognitive closure. This is more pushing kind of this idea of uncertainty. So they want you to be open to this new idea. You have to have an openness to novelty to really be open to being radicalized and recruited. This other idea of time pressure is really big. So people with high need for cognitive closure, they're more likely to make quick decisions. They don't want to think on it. They don't want to ruminate on it. They're just going to decide. Like if you get pressured to something, make a decision on it right away. They don't want the conflict of having to think about it. So something that people target. So end time kind of things. For time pressure, like apocalypse types of messages. So this is an actual tweet I pulled off, and just so I don't keep on saying that, every tweet that I have on here is a tweet that I pulled off the internet. They're all real. I've blocked out their names just because I feel like I have to. But I think they're pretty interesting because they do really speak to these ideas. So this one, all you think this is a game, some fun after school. Have you read a single hadith about Judgment Day? You know it's coming. Hadith, think of it as a devotional. Just someone prominent in Islam said something a long time ago and wrote it down. They got to read it. So Shia and Sunnis have different hadiths. The big message there is Judgment Day. It's this idea that the end times are coming. Make your bed and lie in it kind of thing. So join us so you don't have to go to hell. This other one's ideology. So established ideologies like ISIS, they're more readily accepted. It just makes sense. So if you look at U.S. elections, you see this. People either vote primarily Democrat or Republican. You see the Green Party, and you're like, no one really votes for Green Party. I'm just going to go to Democrat or Republican. That's kind of the issue you see here. Those aren't really established ideologies. ISIS is one of those. I won't relate that to a Democratic or Republican party, but ISIS has a really established identity in the Middle East. They are prominent, they have a caliphate led by a caliph, so you can trust them, right? So that's the ideology they push. They push this idea of a brotherhood and a caliphate. So this is another one, Islamic Brotherhood and the power of the sheikhs of the Arab caliphate. Unfortunately, when I got to it, the tweet was already gone. But it's pushing that idea that we are a brotherhood. We're a group of people, like-minded, we're strong in numbers. This other one's isolation. So something interesting that happened a few years ago, you may have heard this person's name, named Jihad Jain. She's a woman that got radicalized out of the United States. She had just gone through a divorce, moved to a new town, didn't know a whole lot of people, didn't have a whole lot of friends. She ended up marrying a fighter, a terrorist fighter, and ended up trying to kill a cartoonist in Ireland, I think. But she was just a middle-aged white woman, had like no ties to anything Islam, converted really quick because she had nothing else in life. So that's the isolation message they're trying to push. And they show these kind of happy images. My baby, ISIS, family, a woman holding her child. Like, I want to be a part of that. I don't have a child. I don't have a family. So they push this message by enforcing this community aspect of ISIS. So if you're lonely, join ISIS. The next one is kind of going over for intergroup biases. So they want to push the fact that you are part of a larger identity. So this is really big. I found this towards, or back when the Black Lives Matter movement was really prominent and growing. So it's not about color, but far-right Muslims in general, whether they're black or white, red, brown, yellow, etc., pushing this idea that, we're hated too, join us. They saw this other group growing in numbers, not saying BLM's a terrorist group. They saw this other group growing in numbers, they wanted to capitalize on that. So they're very up-to-date with what's going on in the world and take advantage of that. The other one is this coping with this idea of isolation. So you're going to see isolation messages paired with these ideas of community, fraternity, the social aspect. So if you truly believe in Islam, join the Brotherhood and work towards the Islamic Caliphate. Spare us your foe, liberal facsimile. So again, kind of going after these really popular movements in the United States. Like, if you're out there protesting someone getting shot, you don't think that's right, you're not really being a part of anything big. Come join ISIS. We're getting killed every day. Make us large, make us strong. So coping with that sense of community. So religiosity is also a really obvious big factor that we looked at. So we noticed that something pretty interesting. Originally, when someone was introduced to ISIS, they didn't know a whole lot about the Quran except for the few out of context verses that ISIS wanted them to know. So really low religious and theological understanding between these people. But religion, like I said, does give credibility. It makes ISIS a established group. If they were not Islamic, they would have never grown out of the basement they came out of. Conservatism is another one, not ideological conservatism, so don't think about Donald Trump. Think about reverting to normality to reduce anxiety. So conservative feelings, internal conservatism. So they found that people that were highly conservative and high in religious beliefs were really concerned about terrorism. So these two factors make it dangerous for someone to reach out to you. So if you're really highly religious, say you're anything but Islamic, and you have this high conservatism ideal where you're not open to new ideas, you're gonna kind of get rid of the ambiguity by ignoring the fact that it exists. You're going to be concerned about terrorism. You're not going to want to join a terrorist group. So that's a really big thing we looked at, is religiosity. So we had three general hypotheses. It's kind of got molded together after a little while. But we hypothesized that printed channels, the Dabiq in particular, would be targeting more towards individuals further down the path of radicalization, showing more social identity-directed messages compared to Twitter posts. So again, the idea that Twitter, for the new people, the Dabiq for the people that have been in for a while. They know that Dabiq exists, they know how to access those journals. We also thought that Dabiq would have more motivational messages, and then Twitter would have these more idealistic, personal messages. Kind of makes sense. Dabiq wants you to get out there and fight. Twitter wants you to join the group to begin with. You have to have one before the other, chicken before the egg or after the egg. Dabiq articles will have more religious content compared to Twitter posts. This was a little more Guessing, probably the other ones. We weren't really sure what we'd see on Twitter. We knew that Dabiq could be heavily religious. We weren't sure the content of the tweets that we'd be looking at. But we just assumed because Dabiq has more information, we'd probably see a little more. And just because of the fact that, remember, Twitter is not for people who've been in for a while. It's going to be a very low theological understanding. You're not going to see a whole lot of religiosity on Twitter. So I know this is confusing, so I'll just save you the effort. We looked at all of these 7 factors for Twitter and Dabiq. So that's where all those arrows are going. So the 7 factors that we went over, we just did a comparative analysis. So content analysis, what was in each. So the same factors in each, keep everything exactly the same. So the keywords that we're looking at by construct. So you have time pressure, again, apocalyptic messages, judgment day, the end's coming. Ideology, so pushing the idea of world domination, evangelizing, isolation, that idea of family, community, stand out from your present circumstances. That was a really big one. So you might be in the United States, don't be a sheep, be a wolf. Identity intergroup biases, so kafar was a big one. If you're identifying someone as kafar, then you're identifying yourself as Islamic or Muslim because you're identifying an out-group member. So there's an idea of intergroup bias. In-group bias, out-group hostility. Anyone that's not like you, it's not worth your time. And then religiosity conservatism. So this was like Mujahideen, Sharia, Hijra, Khalif Islam, Quran, anything that would go back to Islamic belief. Then I didn't put in keywords for enlistment. I'll mention enlistments we looked at more of like an idea. So if the whole message was really directed towards getting someone to join, we would categorize that as an enlistment. Sometimes it was explicit, sometimes it wasn't necessarily explicit. And then whether or not Allah was mentioned in a particular text was interesting to us. It kind of helped with the religiosity aspect. So that was a yes or no. Was Allah mentioned, or was he not mentioned? So that was actually difficult. Maybe limitation. Allah can be mentioned multiple ways. There's different ways they say his name. So by just looking at Allah, we kind of limited ourselves. We had to like do a little research to figure out inshallah, those kind of things to pull out. Is Allah mentioned? Because it may not be explicitly stated to someone who is not Islamic like myself. These are hashtags that we ended up looking at. So the hashtags that are pointed out by past research were luckily targeted by Twitter, and Twitter had used those hashtags to sweep and clean out all ISIS tweets. So it's a great thing for the world, not such a great thing for me and my research. But we had to kind of create tweets just from what we're seeing currently. So some of we kept. So we have urgent is a big one. Again, that was really difficult to find anything substantial there. Inshallah, kafar, Islamic Khalifa State. So we'd take all of these tweets and we would just do batch searches. And I'll get a little more to that in my methodology. But we had to be a little bit creative. We had to be, just like ISIS is really on the ball with what's going on, we had to be as well. We had to be really dynamic with our research. Doesn't make for good research, by the way, but we did our best. So for collection and coding, when you're just coding textual data, I can look through something and see something completely different than you do. So we have this thing called iterator reliability. We get these, they're called Cohen's kappa values you calculate on your data analysis tools, and basically use this for categorical data, yeses or nos. So we wanted our agreement to be somewhere between 60 to 100%. So I had to get someone else to code it aside from me. If we weren't quite melding together, we weren't quite on the same page, you'd have to meet, discuss it. We're still in the process of doing that. I wouldn't suggest doing qualitative research if you don't have a whole lot of time. It's very, very time consuming. So the Dabiq, I need to mention this, it's FBI approved. Please don't go home and Google the Dabiq and try to find a journal. You will be put on a watch list. I'm on a watch list, I'm sure, but not with the FBI at least. But I collected that online, just had a few sources that I reach out to. I was able to converse with a lot of recruiters and people that were radicalized. I was able to get a lot of this information from them. Twitter, much less sketchy. We just looked at 9 different hashtags, searched those, chose the latest 50 that were there, so ones that had just been posted, because if they're older than an hour, Twitter has probably sweeped them. So we did 9 hashtags, 50 the latest, screenshot each one of them, got 450 total, and then sweeped through that and looked, and myself and another coder separately looked at those and identified which ones we would consider ISIS a radical. There's also another program that I thought worth mentioning. It's called Tacit. When it gets ironed out, this program would have saved me months of my life. Essentially what it does is it crawls through textual databases. So it does a Library of Congress is a big one. You put in a construct like ideology, you define the terms that that construct would use, and this program will search through Twitter and find every single tweet that contains that message. Really great program. It's a brand new program as of a few months ago. So I tried to play around with it. It didn't give me what I wanted, and I didn't have time to reach out to the researchers. But I think it just needs a little more development. But it's a great program if you're doing coding data. So I knew you would be a fan of that. Dr. Richard told me that you would potentially like Tacit. So we could probably talk about that later if you'd like to. I'd like to learn it, so maybe we can learn it together. So these are our results for kind of univariate statistics. So the Dabiq, we found that 52% of the Dabiq was just articles. We found reports were a lot, which is actually something that past research didn't even look at. Just confusing, because ISIS was very courteous and conscientious, and they put what the type of article, statement, or report it was at the bottom of the page. So I knew it was an article because they told me it was an article. I knew it was a report because they told me it was a report. So my number was a little bit different than the past research. I'm not sure why, but mainly we're looking at articles and reports. Reports are similar to articles in that they're just titled reports. I'm not sure what the exact difference is, but mainly those. For Twitter, we found mainly statements, mainly people just out there saying rogue statements, which is actually something that past research kind of contradict a little bit. Past research told us that a lot of people retweet, especially people that are earlier in their radicalization process. They just retweet everything that they see from the recruiters. We didn't see that. We saw mainly people posting their own ideas. So that was actually pretty interesting. So I'm not sure if the recruitment network on Twitter has degraded, but I would say probably did. So now we compared the two, and we ran what's called a chi-square. You run a chi-square when you have two pieces of categorical information. An example of a categorical variable, gender, male or female. So we had basically yeses and nos that we coded as zeros and ones for each of our variables, for each of the Dabiq and Twitter. So we had to run a chi-square on that analysis, which just tells us a pattern of relationship. Does one have more of this variable than the other? So this is all I mentioned, or religious content. We found that Dabiq kind of reigns supreme in both of these. So the little greater than sign. Something that we really expected. Time pressure, so that idea of Judgment Day, and isolation, so pushing the idea that you're by yourself, come join us, need brotherhood. We found those also prominent in the Dabiq as opposed to Twitter. And push for enlistment was larger in the Dabiq. So it seemed like Twitter was more of like an introduction, and they're like, hey, how about you read this journal and see what happens next? And that's where you see push for enlistment come into play later on down the radicalization. And then ideological content, we actually found that out to be pretty equal. It's still a little bit larger in the Dabiq, but not statistically significantly larger. So we ran the data, it wasn't large enough to be different, considered different. And then this idea of intergroup bias is pretty equal. So they're both pushing like, the Gafar messages, like we're a group, don't like them. So this is a graphical representation of our data, just to kind of show, in no way did Twitter outnumber the Dabiq. Part of it is because Twitter has a 40 count limit. The Dabiq, you could literally be as long or as short as you wanted. And when I opened up like 60-page Dabiq articles or 60-page Dabiq journals, it was terrible. It was like, yeah, I had to take a break after just reading some of those. Twitter was much easier to code. As you see, the Dabiq's still much larger, but I starred the ones that weren't really statistically significantly different from each other. So although we coded 44 ideological messages for Twitter and 57 for Dabiq, although that's like a 13 difference, not significant enough to say they're that different from each other. Those are pretty close, but everything else is about what we anticipated. So what now? Defeating Daesh is the phrase that a lot of people use. It's an op-ISIS kind of thing. ISIS has lost a lot of ground. They lost Twitter because of programs like op-ISIS and defeating Daesh. Twitter has become kind of a haven for ISIS haters, which is great. It's just like scared ISIS away to like things like WhatsApp and these more personal, private kind of programs that you'd really have to interact with them to get access to. This is where they're at now. This green area is the Free Syrian Army. Syrian government's got a little bit of control. That's kind of where everything's going on here in Aleppo. You always hear about Aleppo, a bunch of bad stuff. You have, they call them rebels. The Free Syrian Army and Syria are kind of batting heads right now. So some internal conflict there. Assad has his own problems outside of ISIS. And then you have this whole area here that's under ISIS control. So it's not just Operation Inherent Resolve, but they are doing a really great job at getting the Iraqi army in there to take over some of these cities. And the big one that I started here was Dabiq. No longer under ISIS control. The reason why they don't have that journal anymore called Dabiq. So we're making moves. It really is the downfall of ISIS as we know it. So this is the degradation of ISIS media. Something I noticed when I was reading through the Dabiq is the articles from 2015, or the journals 2015 rather, there were a lot of utopian messages in there. Like everything's great, pictures of horses, really positive things. As soon as I got to 2017, it's all war. Like it's all about fighting and winning and come over here and take up arms. The message changed drastically based on the need that they had. They needed warriors. They didn't need people coming over wanting to ride horses. So in 2 years, this massive degradation in the media. It also isolated who they're recruiting from. They're not recruiting from people who want to ride horses in the Syrian countryside. They're recruiting people who want to take guns over to Syria and fight. And they're not recruiting a lot of people anymore, which is the problem for them. Good thing for us. So this was something I put together. These are all kind of important dates that happened in relation to ISIS and Inherent Resolve or different programs like it, anti-ISIS groups. These are the issues of the Dabiq. So this is kind of a turning point here. When Obama really announced he's going to be getting airstrikes in Syria against ISIS, this was a really positive thing for ISIS. We would think that as a negative, like we woke up a sleeping giant. ISIS saw this as kind of the pinnacle of their growth. Like they hit the top, they're on the U.S.'s radar, like they're on top of the world right now. So you can see here, ISIS starts gaining a little bit of ground as things go over. They gain Ramadi in Iraq. They sieged ancient Syria city of Palmyra. They did a ton of damage to the museums there and a lot of the historical monuments there. It's absolutely horrible. But around September 30th, 2015, Russia began doing airstrikes, and they really targeted like high-level leadership. And this is also a really big turning point for ISIS down. So as soon as this started happening, when Russia got involved, that's when ISIS started losing steam. They started losing ground. As you see here, 2016, as they're losing different Iraqi towns, you'll see that they actually lost Dabiq here. It's October 16, 2016. And actually, right before that is when they stopped publishing issues of the Dabiq. So they were actively fighting to gain control of Dabiq and keep it, and failing miserably. A few months later, they didn't have it anymore. So no more Dabiq issues. They don't even own the city anymore, which is a huge blow to ISIS ideology. One of the biggest messages was that they would control this area between Iraq and Syria, this one road that went between the two. Whoever has control of that is prophesied to be the caliphate. They didn't win that. Dabiq was supposed to be this Mecca. It was in the prophecy that the caliphate would own Dabiq. They don't have it anymore. This is a huge blow to ISIS morale. And that's why you cite a lot of these, that's why you see a lot of these war messages now as opposed to utopian messages and horses and all that. So, are there any questions or comments? This is supposed to be funny. It's a little soldier. Yeah.
Now, when we talked about ISIS recruitment much earlier, Western Europe and the United States is still kind of a broad area. Are there any particular areas in either of those two, well, I guess you call them effectively nations, that where most recruitment comes from?
So what do you mean, like within Western Europe?
Yeah, like say that the United States had like 200 recruitments, but let's say hypothetically, I don't presume that a good portion of them came from Oklahoma.
Yeah, well, you'd be surprised actually. There's information that came out recently that showed that It's not big cities, it's not small cities, it's not Oklahomas, it's not New Yorks. They're coming from everywhere. Like, it's not the location as much as it is the person. So you'd expect to see recruitment coming out of New York City, but you're seeing it come out of Dade County, Miami area. So these much bigger cities and not as much of a big city, completely ethnically different. You're still seeing recruitment coming out of both of those cities. So they don't have like city-to-city data in Europe, but it's pretty broad. Little pinpoints. So they're not like big chunks of groups of people. Canada is problematic. Canada lost like 20 or some odd citizens from a single mosque. Went over to Syria a year back or so. So those kind of issues don't happen as much anymore because that's just too obvious. So there's work on it, but there's not the research out there to show like trends and location. Yeah.
Where's the financing coming from, and how easy is it to cut it off?
Oil's the biggest one. Oil's their biggest way of getting money, and we could cut it off if it wasn't for like, the Turkish government, Syria, Russia buying it through back channels and black market. Oil's the big one. We made a mistake in Iraq by burning up oil fields. Didn't do a whole lot. So we gained control of either the oil, or we put sanctions on people that are purchasing the oil. We can kind of cut off that flow of cash. That is the major one. They gained a lot of oil fields and are still holding on to them. That's why they're giving up some of the cities that they held on to so dearly, because they want the oil fields. They need the money. So yeah, it goes back to kind of the problems we have in the Middle East. As soon as ISIS is gone, either another group's going to pop up in its wake, or you're going to see it being divided up between Russia, Syria, Iran. You're not going to see, the lines in the map aren't going to be the same after this. So the way I kind of think about it is World War II, where the United States kind of paired with Russia to accomplish a goal. Afterwards, we immediately entered the Cold War. I think we all should be a little concerned about what's going to happen after ISIS is gone. We're kind of seeing what happened yesterday, what Putin is saying today in terms of how his feelings are towards the United States. We want to make sure that we don't enter into another Cold War. We also want to make sure that we don't enter into issues where we're funding terrorists by buying their oil. There's a perfect balance there somewhere. I think that's why policymakers need to be really smart. They need to be really up to date with what's going on with ISIS. So daily stuff. Yeah.
Let's say hypothetically ISIS is defeated about next year or so. Is there any organization that is concerned that they will just replace ISIS?
Yeah, Al-Qaeda's growing really fast. Al-Qaeda is the biggest threat now, aside from ISIS. So the people that are actually leaving ISIS are fleeing to Al-Qaeda because they see them as growing. So that's definitely an issue. We're going to be fighting a battle that we fought since 1991. The same organization. Not really, no. It's kind of like the law of energy. Like you can't destroy it; it just transfers. It's kind of what we're seeing with radicalization and this radical ideology. We can't destroy the ideology. You can't really fight an ideology. You're just getting transferred to a new group. So the whole like dropping a ball in a puddle of water and watching it disperse, that's kind of what we're seeing happening. It's just getting dispersed. You're seeing thousands of ISIS fighters leaving ISIS, but going into the arms of Hezbollah or Al-Qaeda. So we're not really defeating anything right now. And there's the issue, Obama said back in 2008, you can't fight an ideology with guns. It does seem like, as of today, people reacting to the strikes there in Syria, it doesn't seem like you can fight it with bombs either. So we need to figure out a way, empirically figure out a way, to go after ISIS and groups like it. That's what we're doing. If we can stop recruitment, you can kind of clog that leaky faucet, stop the little drips of information getting through. That's kind of the goal of the research, and that's why I picked up this type of research. Anything else?
It's like pretty clear that for the most part it looks like ISIS is kind of slowing the recruitment and everything, but with like the anti-Muslim rhetoric, especially during the election, with like the radical Islamic terrorism that people were saying, is there any evidence in the research that helped ISIS kind of use that rhetoric to recruit more, or?
Yeah, absolutely. It wasn't good for us. It was bad for recruitment. So anti-Islamic sentiment really lended to a lot of people going to fight with them. It gave them credibility, like us wanting to fight them to begin with. But the big issue was we saw this really weird spike in the propaganda coming out. That was all about, like, they hate us, come help us, like, they're attacking us, they don't like Muslims anywhere, they hate all Muslims, not just Sunni or Shia, come fight with ISIS. So anti-Muslim rhetoric is extremely damaging to the United States' image there for a very long time. So that's one of the things we also need to work on too, is, you know, we're a nation of many colors, a nation of many religions. Going after Muslims as a whole is just not the way to attack the real root of the problem, which is radical Islam, which is arguably different than Muslims and Islam. You can have Islam as a political ideology, and you can be a religious Muslim. They're two different things. So we need to figure out what our enemy really is, and not go after the wrong one. It's not doing us any favors, that's for sure. Yeah.
When you're talking about your research and your findings, you kept saying we. I asked who you work with.
Yeah, I'll go back to the beginning. Very long time. I work with Dr. Dan Richard. He's the head of the Office of Faculty Enhancement. And he also works in the lab with Dr. Debbie Wong. She works in the psychology department. And I shouldn't note, because he's been a champ, is my second coder, Greg Rucise. He's a first-year graduate student psychology program. So right now we're working primarily within the psychology department, which is kind of contradicting, considering I said at the beginning we need to collaborate. But we're working on it. It's a work in progress. So that's a good question. But if you're interested in that kind of work, absolutely reach out to any of those people. Anybody else? You guys will let me off easy.
I'm gonna ask you the same question we just heard from Dr. DiGiorio, and I asked her a question about discipline, because her she's an anthropologist, but the work that she was talking about was largely historical research. You're in the psychological science master's program, but it seems like what you're doing is also closely related to communication studies and international affairs.
Watch your mouth.
I'm just curious, within psychology as a field, or psychological science as a field, is this kind of work, I mean, are you pushing the boundaries of what could be done in your program here, or what can be done within a larger field? Yeah,
absolutely. Both, I think. I think the program here, there's a student before me that did fear of terrorism, phenomenal work on it. But I'm definitely reaching out beyond that, kind of expanding what you can do with psychology. Too many people jump into the behavioral mechanisms behind behavior. That was really redundant. Behavioral mechanisms behind action. What I'm trying to do is build a foundation first. And the foundation, in my eyes, is the information that's coming through. So you start with the information, and then you move up to the behavioral mechanisms. So I think that my research is going back and covering up areas that haven't been covered yet. So I think there is definitely broadening of, maybe there's a lot of gray area here. Psychology is kind of in the center, and my research is kind of blending out a little bit. I don't think that the CIA, the NSA, FBI, I don't think they care about what discipline you're in. They want to solve a problem. So you can do that under any banner. I just chose psychology. I think it's a good point. I think this collaboration just out of necessity, because this is a multifaceted problem. It needs to be taken from a multifaceted point of view. Yeah. I hope I answered that well. I don't remember what the question was.
And Dr. Richard is your advisor for this project.
Yeah.
But this isn't the type of work that he does, correct?
Not consistently. So he's interested in lay epistemology, so why normal people do the things they do. But he's had a student before me that did a fear of terrorism study. His name's Daniel Snook. He's actually working under one of the most prominent researchers in this field, Dr. John Horgan, up at Georgia State. And I think that might have been one of his introductions into it, but I know he's on the chair for the Society for Terrorism Research. He does those conferences every year. So he's definitely heavily involved. I don't think he presents it on his website probably as much, maybe for personal reasons I understand. But he's generally interested in why normal people do the way they do, which is a really wide net. I think this is one of those things that answers that question: why do normal people join radical groups? So yeah, I didn't know that until I started this program. I reached out and said what I wanted to do, and Dr. Tracy Alloway pushed me towards his direction. So I was actually really fortunate. He's a very intelligent human being, and he knows a lot about data and a lot about quantitative and qualitative methods, which was news to me, and I got a rude awakening one day. But I've learned. Yeah, he's blending. Yeah.
In schools now, they're teaching, and I don't even know if it's nationally, I just have seen it in a couple of schools, read some articles about it. They're teaching the Quran, they're teaching the history of Muhammad. I've seen it with your niece, so.
That's my mother, by the way.
So my question is, a lot of people are freaking out about that, and they want the Quran out of the schools. They don't know why they're teaching it, and they're not really focused on any other religious studies in early elementary like they are this. And my question is the knowledge and education of it protecting these kids as they grow up from recruitment, from false information, giving them the understanding, or is it opening their mind to a religion that a lot of people are afraid of because they don't have the background in the study? A lot of people aren't picking up the Quran and reading it and trying to understand the religion. They're just watching CNN and Fox and just making their determinations that way, so they're being spoon-fed what they're supposed to know. So is this helping in the long run? I mean, it kind of just popped up out of nowhere.
Yeah, I think it is.
All of a sudden we're teaching this in the schools.
I think it's a positive thing. We're a largely Christian nation. To not acknowledge that would be a fault of our own. So you get a pretty good introduction to Christianity very early in life, whether or not you're raised in that environment or not. You're surrounded by people who probably are. Teaching the Quran does safeguard against these type of messages because they're not telling you what the Quran says. They're telling you what they think the Quran says. So you don't get direct quotes from the Quran from ISIS. You get like hadiths, interpretations, and then a citation of where it is in the Quran. And you've already been biased by the message you've read. So if you've already read the message, it's not new to you, you're going to be wary of seeing something that's an interpretation of it. So it's very similar to how the Westboro Baptist Church perverts Christianity. ISIS perverts Islam and the belief in the Quran. And since most of us know kind of the tenets of Christianity, we know that Westboro Baptist Church is a bunch of crazy people. Not many of us know that the Quran, like what's in it, what it contains, the tenets of the Quran. So we see somebody holding a Quran in their hand, an AK-47, standing in front of a dead body. We're like, wow, Quran's bad. Like, it's terrible. Because we don't know what's in it. So by educating people young, we can start to introduce them to the concepts that the Quran actually speaks. The Quran's not that much different than the Bible. It's if you look at the history of religion kind of broadly, it starts with Judaism, Christianity, and then like Islam. And in the Quran it mentions the name of Jesus. It's in there. Many people don't know that, but Christians would be like, oh, they think that Muhammad replaced Jesus. It's not the case. They're kind of in the same position. Jesus is just a prophet. He wasn't the Son of God like Christians believe. So if we teach the Quran very young, we can see there's more similarities than differences. It's just slight little alterations to text can mean a world of difference. If you're already biased against something, you're taught that the Quran is evil, you haven't picked it up and read it, you're afraid to buy it from the store, order on Amazon, I did. You're not going to want to approach it with the same kind of mentality as someone who was introduced at like 6 years old. So I think it's important to bring it up in classes. I think they need to. I think people need to be made aware of the real message inside the Quran and not the message that ISIS perverted. Even if just from a historical standpoint. If you're not a religious person, it's just a historical text. Yeah.
Going back to like the social media kind of aspect, I know you said Twitter got better about kind of weeding out the different like ISIS recruiters.
Yeah.
So especially with hashtags kind of spreading across different platforms, do you think you would go and do a study where you don't necessarily just focus on Twitter, but you go into some of those other platforms now that hashtags are kind of more prevalent?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's the next step for this research is to kind of blow up what social media is, investigate what ISIS is currently using, and then go look there. Like you said, Twitter is not what it used to be in terms of recruitment. A year ago, like I could find a tweet in no time. Now, thankfully, I can't. Kind of sucks for my research though. So I need to kind of branch out to different kind of social media channels to determine what the messages really are out there in these new ways. Because if you can get more than 40 characters on something like WhatsApp, what's to stop you from writing a book on WhatsApp? And how is that different from the book that's published by the Ohio Media Center? So it's interesting. I think there's a lot of research to be done on social media. I think that someone could spend their entire life researching media online and recruitment messages that come out. I hope that's not me, but maybe. I don't know. We'll see how the cards go. But I think WhatsApp is the next big one. It's one of the ones they mentioned. So I'd like to go there and see what's happening, and as well as open it up to Ramaya. Kind of what is ISIS saying now in the Ramaya that they weren't saying in Dabiq. So there's a lot of work to be done. I only had 2 years. Anything else? Yeah.
What are your plans after graduate school?
So I have a few options kind of open. Mom, plug your ears. No, I have a few ideas. I spoke to Dr. McCarl the other day, or last month. CIA is a big one. Looking at that as being an analyst. More recently, I was looking at the United States Air Force as an option. They have some pretty awesome jobs in investigations and things that I can do the research I'm doing. The goal is to kind of get away from internal review board or institutional review board restrictions to the IRB, which goes through everything that you're doing and determines if you're allowed to do it. You don't really have those restrictions in the United States government. You get assigned something and you get all of these back channels of information. I don't have to worry about being put on a list like I am now or getting a knock on my door one night. So those are my goals, to kind of allow myself more tools in my toolkit. The only way to do that is through government. So I'm excited about it. We'll see what happens. I'm looking forward to boot camp. It'll be terrible.
Can you explain that? Do you have to do You have to get institutional review board approval to do this type of research?
For this research, no.
No.
I got around them by doing qualitative studies, so no human subjects. I didn't. Originally, my study was to sit someone down in front of a computer, show them 100 tweets, and then have them decide to retweet, like, or share or something, whatever the terms were. And I would infuse radical messages from a Christian aspect or a non-religious aspect, being something like PETA. No offense to any PETA supporters in here, but something like really, really radical belief, that's something that Westerners are used to, and see how people reacted to those. And the UNF didn't like that. It's still sitting in someone's desk at IRB, the office here. They were afraid I was going to radicalize people. So, I mean, the beard didn't help. But that's kind of why I went qualitative with it. I'm not going to push anybody's buttons. I want to get out of here on time. So, so I kind of left that aside. But if I wanted to work with human subjects, if I want to interact with actual recruiters in person and talk to them and engage with them, I would need to go through a slew of IRB meetings and processes. The bureaucracy would hold me down, I think, quite a bit. And this program's 2 years, so it's really restricted to what I could actually do. So qualitative, no human subjects research, just textual data was the easiest way to get around that. So they're like, oh no, you can't do that. All right, going around you. I'll do it my own way. So you don't have that same process when you work for like a governmental institution. Just kind of they give you restrictions, and you can't share certain things, but I won't have to go and sit in front of a room full of academics and answer to how I'm not radicalizing students. That's crazy. That's why I'm not radicalizing students. I'm not that stupid. Anybody else? You're thinking, man. You're rubbing your chin. All right. Well, I appreciate you guys all being here. Is there anything you want to say?
No, I just wanted to say, I want to say the same thing. Thank you so much for coming.
Yeah,
and I'm really grateful to Evan for his fascinating talk. So, best of luck to you.
If you want to talk to me later on or something, I have cards that I had made up, so you can come collect one if you want to. And I'm more than happy to share anything with anybody that I'm allowed to share. I don't want to get you in trouble. All right, thank you guys. Appreciate it.
to ask.
I would say my name again. That's like right after.
Oh, hi, Brett. Nice to meet you. Thanks for coming. So you're graduating, is that right?
Primarily cognitive psychology.
I did meet her at Sarah talk. She was there. And
Because I mean,
I do think these are practices that aren't direct, like psychology.
so she teaches a class of real policy.
So you're more in a
Oh, that's cool.
Quantitative.
quantitative. And where are you headed next?
After this?
After your
Hi, nice to meet you. I went to high school and college. And that's how I met. This is Jordan. Hi, nice to meet you.
I'm definitely down that see your shoes. But I understand you doing that. It's a problem. FBI is
Yeah, you should get Nancy. She's great. Her sister is really
It is late.
Yeah, so we just talked about
So I
graduated 3 years ago, so it's
is that it was real strange when we had this recruiter come to give out these cards and they
not doing school right now.
this guy didn't give us his name and he didn't give us any contact information. Partly because he's not the assigned recruiter for the area, so he was covering us.
a lot of work. It's very intimidating.
But that essentially was what he said. For more information, go to ca.gov.
I'll age out of military
They
eventually.
do all their hiring.
25.
Most of their
35
jobs are all USA
I'm not super away
jobs.
from it.
But they
If
do
I
all
join
the
the CIA,
hiring.
I don't like so I feel like the Air Force done, the analyst to do a little bit, and then transition. CIA talking guy kept on saying, don't rush. He's like, you'll be naturally here. It's always going to be there. So, it helps. Yeah, absolutely helps. So, yeah, it's a trade-off.
Yeah, and he didn't, I
sacrifice.
mean, when he talked, he didn't
6 years
approach
on.
it in terms of job
If I
pay.
get to do this
He talked
stuff,
about the different
Well, that's the
four
one thing.
areas in which the CIA
oh, or
administrative realm.
Sorry, can you-
Okay, well, it's worth it. And look up at Nancy Soderbergh.
Absolutely.
I'm great, I appreciate it.
That you would be limited to the job descriptions you see posted there.
Right. Well, I know that, on the site, it says that there are positions you apply for, but based on, if we see that, or experience and testing says you're qualified for something that's not listed, we're
Right.
So,
Yeah, so I like answer questions on that.
Yeah.
I came from teaching.
Yeah, so unfortunately, like if it were, we have Peace Corps events and things like that, I could tell you right now, here's who you need to talk to.